What's up, college football fans? Welcome back to the show. The selection committee has arrived. They have spoken for the first time. And friends, that means that we are on the home stretch down the college football regular season and really in the heat of the hunt for the playoff. We're going to talk a little bit about the selection committee's choices, who they have in the first bracket. Not only did they give us a bracket, they gave us a top 25, so we can take a look at who might be right on the bubble as far as the selection committee is concerned. And then we can take a look at our picks for the week. But before we get to all that, let's take a look back at week 10, who collected flowers and who's playing with weeds. And it starts with 9-0 Indiana. The Hoosiers destroyed Maryland, just like we thought they would. They more than tripled the Terps' top 20 scoring defensive average. Maryland was allowing 17.8 points per game. They gave up 55 to Indiana. That was a 55-10 drubbing. The Hoosier offense rolled up 588 total yards. The defense created a whopping 5 takeaways, and Indiana ultimately doubled Maryland's time of possession. It was an ass kicking. It was exactly what we thought Coach Kurt and the team were going to deliver. Next up, Penn State. We think another one's in store, and we'll have more thoughts on that in a moment as we look around the country in our big game tracker. Next up for collecting their flowers, SEC leaders. SEC leaders took care of business, and they have given the selection committee's inaugural 25 a lot of fodder to play with. We've got 4 teams projected into the first field: Alabama, Georgia, Texas A&M, and Ole Miss. Could the SEC get a 5th team? Well, maybe if the Big Ten can only get 3 seeds in, which would be Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon. Those look like the 3 that are likely to get in at this point. It's hard to imagine somebody else climbing in. Maybe USC, not impossible, but hard to imagine. If the ACC can only justify 1, and surprise, surprise, we're going to talk about it in a second, but we think the ACC can only justify 1, and then potentially the Big 12 goes from 2 in BYU and Texas Tech to 1, especially if Texas Tech wins in a blowout, then all of a sudden there is definitely room for the SEC to get a almost unimaginable 5th team into the playoffs. Texas isn't totally alive again yet, but they're also really close at number 11 in the rankings. Vandy isn't totally dead yet, but they are close. And then you've got Oklahoma and Missouri, who are also technically still in the mix, though as we will get to in a bit, we suspect Missouri's road ends on Saturday. Now, next, collecting their roses, let's go back to the Big 12. If BYU loses badly, it's going to be a different story next week. But for now, we have number 8 Texas Tech against number 9 BYU. Big 12 fans, BYU fans, Red Raider fans, all rejoice for the Red Raiders and the Cougars not just being top 10 teams, but both being projected into the college football field ahead of what could be the Big 12 game of the year on Saturday in Lubbock. If these 2 teams can deliver anything close to an instant classic, the selection committee's initial rankings indicate that both teams could make the playoff regardless of who prevails this weekend. If it's a lopsided game, BYU beating up Texas Tech could still lend Texas Tech into the playoffs. It's hard to imagine it going the other way. It just is. And then when we look at the next team to collect some flowers, we're turning our attention to the group of 5 race, and it's the 8-1 North Texas Mean Green, who remains squarely in that race for the group of 5 playoff bid by handing fellow hopeful Navy their first loss of the year. Mean Green quarterback Drew Mestamaker does have a 608-yard passing game on the books this season, but against Navy, the team that loves to run, it was all North Texas's bell cow running back Caleb Hawkins and the 197 rushing yards and 4 touchdowns he generated on 33 carries. Now, North Texas's defense is suspect as hell, but their offense could make a first-round college football playoff game interesting at the very least. Another team that is in the mix and maybe could make a playoff game interesting are the 8-1 San Diego State Aztecs. They won again, and they iced the cover against Wyoming last week with a Lucky Sutton 50-yard touchdown run late in the fourth quarter. That marks 6 straight wins for the Aztecs, and they are doing it a bunch of different ways. With a road date at Hawaii on Saturday, followed immediately by a showdown with the 3-loss Boise State Broncos at home, SDSU will be tested. Should they pass the test, the decibels around their group of 5 playoff candidacy is going to rise significantly. All right, those are the teams collecting flowers in Week 10. Now let's talk about the conference and the teams that played in the weeds and did not pass go, did not collect $200 in Week 10. It starts with the entire ACC. And look, as an old school Pac-12 fan, I feel a lot of these pains deeply. But these ACC teams are repeatedly falling flat in big spots. You look at North Carolina in multiple spots, bringing a lot of shame to the program and the conference this year, although they are arrow up a little bit. You look at Florida State, who actually got everybody excited that maybe in addition to Clemson, Miami, and SMU, there was a 4th ACC team that was a true playoff threat when they beat Bama at home to open the year. Ultimately, though, Florida State has fallen flat. Clemson has fallen flat. There is nothing close to an S-tier team in this conference, which is probably the most egregious fact about the ACC this year. Clemson started the year number 4. They've fallen into complete mediocrity. Will Dabo Swinney keep his job? We'll talk about that in a second. Miami was looking really good, but just like we said would happen, Mario Cristobal botched a couple games, and now Miami is very much on the outside looking in. It's hard to see them getting back in the race. So, one ACC bid for the ACC champion, and who will it even be in this crowded ACC? Is it Louisville without their leading rusher? Is it Virginia, who the selection committee has projected in their first bracket? Is it Pitt and their freshman quarterback? Or does Georgia Tech find a way to get back in the mix? Does it really matter? Because none of these teams feel like they're truly CFP caliber at this point anyways. And in fairness, it is a bit of a full circle moment that the ACC has such a dearth of teams that are in consideration. When we flash back to the preseason rankings, the ACC had just 2 teams in the top 10, number 4 Clemson and number 10 Miami, and only one more in the top 20 with number 16 SMU, which of course made the playoff last year. Compare that to 10 SEC teams and 6 Big Ten teams. Is that something that plays out as a result of those early rankings? I mean, we know how, those rankings can be very political, and early rankings, what do they even mean? Well, whatever the reason, we are where we are, and the ACC looks like it's going to have one playoff bid this year. It has to feel like a truly lost year for the conference when you think back to the aspirations before week 1. Now, moving on to teams, Houston Cougars, how dare you? After learning our lesson, fading you multiple times this season, we finally bought back into the continuous improvement from Connor Weigman in the offense ahead of last week's matchup with West Virginia. And then y'all went and got embarrassed by the young buck Scotty Fox Jr. Well, to quote Kenny Powers, you're effing out of the Big 12 title race, out of Uncle Denny's heart forever. You're done. Scotty Fox Jr., you're effing in. Cincinnati, you're also getting weeds this week. I mean, come on, Bearcats, you broke my heart. Feels like I barely even knew you. Who were you even? What were we? There were questions about the defense ahead of Utah, there's no doubt. And not having your workhorse starting running back and Pryor available, that always adds to the degree of difficulty. But boy, we thought plus 10 was an unfair line given all that you've done this season. And then you got absolutely shredded by the Utes, 45-14, extinguishing your playoff hopes and dreams and turning the carriage back into a pumpkin at the stroke of the final horn. Cincinnati's done, out of the Big 12 race. There's just no way that they're going to climb back in if that's what they look like against Utah. Now, moving back to the group of 5. How annoyed is 6-2 Tulane with itself at the moment? The Green Wave may have had a look-ahead game against UTSA, and they lost it. They lost it after griping about UTSA potentially piping in sound into the stadium, and it's a damn shame because Tulane had already beaten Duke and Northwestern, 2 above 500 Power 4 teams who we respect, and they have a, quality loss to Ole Miss. It was 45-10, but, they made some big mistakes in that game, and for parts of that game, they looked very competitive. The wins have only grown in value as Duke and Northwestern have outperformed expectations in the win column this year. And this weekend's tilt at Memphis could, in theory, have been the win that would have clinched the Group of 5 playoff berth. But Tulane botched that game against UTSA, losing by 22 points to a 4-4 UTSA team. That's not good. And while Tulane may play spoiler this week, it's hard to imagine Tulane as the choice after that performance. Now, finally, moving on to coaches. We are officially on watch for next coach fired for both Deion Sanders at Colorado and Dabo Swinney at Clemson. And apparently they're talking to each other about it. Go Google it. Look, Coach Prime and his Buffaloes lost 52-17 at home to the Arizona Wildcats, turning the ball over 5 times on Saturday. That would potentially be the worst loss of Neon Deion's career, but that ignominious distinction actually goes to the 53-7 drubbing Colorado took just a week prior at the hands of Utah. That's right. Sanders has been outscored 105-24 in the last 8 quarters the Buffs have played. That $30+ million buyout isn't feeling so expensive right now, is it, Buffaloes fans? Now, Dabo Swinney can honestly say, well, at least we ain't Colorado, but the expectations at Clemson are also very different, aka much higher than they are in Boulder, especially when you have a recent history of not just winning national titles, but sending fleets of first-round draft picks into the NFL. Losing 46-45 at home to Duke, a basketball school, to fall to a previously unfathomable 3-5 on the year? Oof. That's bad. That's bad. 3 more losable games still remain on the schedule, too, before the season is out. Is Dabo going to survive? It's really, honestly, it's hard to see how he does. And if they let him hang on until the end of the season, you've got to imagine after that last game, we're going to have the news within 24 hours that he's out and Clemson is in the mix for a coach. And where does Clemson fall amid the LSUs and the Penn States and the Floridas? We'll discuss that when and if that role comes open, but you got to imagine it's coming. All right, now let's talk about the selection committee, the initial bracket, and their top 25 rankings. It wasn't hugely surprising to see any of the selection committee's decisions. It starts with number 1, Ohio State, getting a bye, followed by number 2, Indiana. We think that's fair. Number 3, Texas A&M. Look, this wasn't surprising. We can feel how we feel about Texas A&M, and we think, arrow up on our comfort with Texas A&M. Still, seeded 3rd feels a little high. Number 4 is Alabama, and that especially makes A&M feel high. Realize that A&M is undefeated. We think that Bama's a better team. Following Bama, you have the 5th seed Georgia. You have the 6th seed Ole Miss Rebels. You have the 7th seed in the BYU Cougars. The 8th seed in the Texas Tech Red Raiders. That's going to shake out this weekend. You got the 9th seed in our beloved Oregon Ducks. The 10 seed is Notre Dame. We're not so sure Notre Dame belongs here, but we'll see how the selection committee thinks about Notre Dame going forward. They always get the benefit of the doubt. You got to imagine they will, as long as they keep winning against a soft schedule. And then, of course, we've got the 11 seed Virginia Cavaliers, the last of the champions, sneaking into the last possible seed they could be put in. And then the 12 seed Memphis Tigers, which could be Memphis, could be any number of teams, of course. So that is the first bracket. It's really pretty much what we expected. When you look beyond the seeds that made it into the bracket, you have Texas at 11. Right behind Texas, you have Oklahoma at 12. You have Utah at 13. So that Utah win over Cincinnati impressed some people. And you got Louisville at 15, Vanderbilt at 16, Georgia Tech at 17, and then Miami. Again, Miami, outside looking in. You got USC at 19, followed by Iowa. Again, I don't really think that a 4th Big Ten team has a shot at this point, but maybe USC. I have a much harder time believing it's Iowa, although if Iowa beats Oregon and wins out, maybe. But then does Oregon make it, or is it, again, 3 seeds from the Big Ten? You got Missouri at the 22 spot in the rankings. We think that Missouri falls out this week when Texas A&M beats them. You've got Washington, who again hasn't really beaten anybody. I don't think Washington's a threat. And then Pittsburgh and Tennessee. 3-loss Tennessee, the only 3-loss team to make it in the selection committee's top 25. Note that there are no group of 5 teams in the top 25. Obviously, if there was no automatic bid for the group of 5, this would be one of those years where none made it in. And honestly, that's probably the best thing because we want to see the best team win the national championship. Why should somebody get to play a group of 5 team in the first round, even with buys and all that? It's just, why do we need that? And, in the years where a team really jumps up, we have to imagine they're going to get, stuck in that 12th seed anyways. Like Boise State last year wasn't going to get left out. So, are there years where there's a really, really good group of 5 team we should consider? Yes. Is that most years? No. Okay, now, that's 9 SEC teams in the top 25, 8 of whom have a real shot at making the playoff. Sorry, Tennessee, we already said 3 losses, you're out. Mizzou, you better beat A&M on Saturday. The SEC is currently projected for 4 bids. That's 33% of the field, but could that end up being 5 when it's all said and done? Notre Dame isn't going to lose to Navy this weekend, but could they lose to 7-2 Pitt next week on the road? Entirely possible, especially if Panthers' Mason Heinschel has another big game in the battle of the Super Frosh quarterbacks where he takes on Notre Dame's CJ Carr. And I mentioned the Big Ten is looking like a 3-bid conference. Don't see a 4th. Not even sure that Oregon is going to be the 3rd. The ACC isn't stealing a bid. The Group of 5 raffle winner only gets in for that reason. I don't know. I think it could be a 5-bid year for the ACC. And as much as I would love to be an SEC hater, I think it's fair. Now, let's turn our attention to our top 5 hunches of the week. We went 2-3 last week. 2-3, 3-2, 3-2, 2-3. This is a theme, and we've continued the theme through week 10. Indiana thumped Maryland and covered for us. San Diego State dominated Wyoming and covered for us, but Houston suffered a shocking outright loss against West Virginia. Washington State fell apart late in the first round of the Pac-2 championship game, and they also lost outright as a 3.5-point favorite. And then Georgia won but failed to cover against what was a plucky Florida team in their first game without Billy Napier in the world's largest outdoor solo cup party. That brings us to 18-17 on the year. Look, we're still above 500. That feels good. We're above water. It feels okay. It doesn't feel good. What will feel good is having a big week this week and creating more buffer in the win column. The stakes are going to increase every week in every race across the country, and we're looking forward to backing some motivated, hungry teams as this home stretch begins. So let's get into it. Our first hunch of the week has Indiana, 15.5-point favorites, on the warpath to the Big Ten title game, rolling over Penn State in the process. Curt Cignetti may not say anything you can do, I can do better, but he'll be thinking it about Ohio State again this week. Indiana has quietly become one of the most reliable against the spread teams in the country, and until the results say otherwise, we're backing the Big Red Machine. The Hoosiers are 6-3 against the spread on the season, but if you double click into that, it's even more impressive as they've covered 3 of their last 4 and 6 of their last 8, including a barely missed cover against Michigan State by just 1.5 points. Meanwhile, Penn State has been a bettor's nightmare at 1-7 against the spread, consistently underwhelming and failing to match market expectations. We just watched Ohio State beat Penn State 38-14 in Columbus, covering with ease as a 17.5-point favorite. Indiana now enters a similar matchup a week later as a slightly smaller favorite, but on the road, and you better believe Curt Cignetti wants to post a result that looks just as dominant. Okay, let's be honest, even better. And he has the formula to do that by being able to say, hey, we didn't do it at home, we did it on the road, and we won by a bigger margin. Cignetti is a coach who thrives on statement victories and even louder press conferences. As the legendary coach of the Hawks, Jack Riley, once said, it's not worth winning if you can't win big. Penn State is downtrodden, but they are no Mighty Ducks. The defense is respectable. They're going to try and keep it competitive. We just don't believe that the Lions have the juice offensively to keep pace, especially since Drew Aller went down. Now, If only they could take his NIL ads down as well. Look, to wrap it up, Indiana's schemes are sharper. They're more talented offensively. They attack weaknesses that Penn State simply hasn't shown the discipline to handle this year. If this weren't Penn State's name on the jersey, the spread would be closer to 24.5 based on performance alone. Could Penn State find the motivation after collapsing at Ohio? Possibly. But their second half effort in Columbus didn't look like a team that was ready for a late season redemption push. Give us Indiana in a 37-10 win. Now, in our second hunch of the week, we're going to another Big Ten school, and we're backing the Northwestern Wildcats, who we believe will remind the Big Ten once again that they are not to be overlooked this year, covering a 14.5-point spread at USC on Friday night. To be clear, they're catching 14.5 points on Friday night. Now, Northwestern continues to be underestimated by Vegas, but their performance this season suggests that they're far from the typical doormat that they tend to be. The Wildcats are 5-1-1 against the spread over the last 7 games, consistently outperforming expectations despite the fact that this is a pretty modest offense. They've averaged just 18.6 points per game in Big Ten play, but their defense has been so good, it's carried Northwestern to a 3-2 conference record. It's legit strong, ranking 13th in the nation in scoring defense at just 16.8 points allowed per game. They also rank 13th nationally in pass defense, and they haven't allowed a 100-yard receiver all season, a testament to how disciplined and well-coached their secondary is. Now, USC is going to test that group. Jaden Maiava and especially emerging star wide receiver Mekhi Lemon are going to look to stretch the field and hit big plays. We don't expect them to rewrite the Wildcats' defensive identity on their own. Where Northwestern is vulnerable is against the run, and their 3 losses came when they gave up 150 rushing yards in each of those contests. USC, however, enters this matchup extremely thin at running back. They've been leaning on third stringer and former walk-on King Miller, and while he has flashed with 200-yard games in his last 3, there is very little depth behind him, and if he struggles like he did at Notre Dame, USC won't have the balance needed to break this game open. Meanwhile, Northwestern's offense just needs to do enough in this one. Score a couple times, protect the ball, and trust the defense to keep it close. USC's defense looked improved against Nebraska. We will give them that. But it still is not a defense in the same tier as Oregon, Penn State, or even Nebraska's units, all of which Northwestern has already faced, learned from, and can apply in this game against USC. And then look, the stakes. USC is right on the bubble. They've got to be feeling it. They lose one more time, their season's over, and the expectations are always playoff or bust in LA, regardless of whether that's justified or not. Northwestern is playing with house money. They're playing with identity-building motivation. And we think that's going to be more than enough to help them cover the 14.5. Give us USC to win 27-17, but give us Northwestern to cover the number. In our third hunch of the week, we've got Scotty Fox Jr. and the West Virginia Mountaineers continuing their competitive play. We like the cut of Scotty's jib and taking full advantage of a Colorado Buffaloes team that's continuing their uncompetitive play, thinking that this is going to result in a relatively easy Mountaineers cover of the 6.5 points. Look, Colorado, as we mentioned, has been completely overwhelmed in its last 2 outings, getting outscored 105-24. Meanwhile, West Virginia has gone the opposite direction, becoming far more competitive behind freshman quarterback Scotty Fox Jr., who is their 4th starting quarterback of the season and easily their best. 4th time's a charm. The Buffs have covered just once in their last 4 games, by contrast, while West Virginia is 3-1 against the spread in that same stretch. Now, covering the 6.5 means the West Virginia Mountaineers simply need to maintain the offensive rhythm that they built these last couple games and critically avoid turnovers and long scoring droughts. That's something they've done well since Fox settled in during the second half of the TCU game. He followed that performance with a poised, balanced showing against a tough Houston defense, and it's clear Rich Rod has found a quarterback that he genuinely trusts to run his system. West Virginia likely won't need to score 50 points to take control here, but getting to 30 feels realistic against a Colorado defense that frankly looks lost and somewhat disengaged. Asking Colorado to cover plus 6.5 against anyone right now requires both a major attitude shift and a defensive turnaround that we haven't seen in weeks. The one spark of hope that the Buffaloes have is true freshman 5-star quarterback Julian Lewis, the third quarterback that Colorado has turned to this season. But Lewis isn't a dual threat quarterback who can rely on his scrambling. He was the number 3 pocket passer and the number 12 overall player in the class of 2025. He's going to need to be precise and composed in his first start, on the road no less, against a West Virginia team and crowd that finally feels energized. This sort of gives me Bryce Underwood vibes. It took Bryce Underwood several games to look like a competent quarterback in the pocket. Why do we think it's going to be any different for Julian Lewis in a tougher spot with less talent around him and nothing to play for as a team? Look, if Colorado has indeed quit on Deion and the coaching staff, which the last 2 performances suggest they have, West Virginia should be able to control this game without much stress at all. It's extremely rare for a team to get beaten this badly, twice in a row, and then suddenly come back with a full effort competitive performance the next week. We don't think it's going to happen here either. Give us West Virginia 33-20 in a game where Colorado backdoors the 20 and it's not even that close. West Virginia covers the 6.5. All right, in our 4th hunch of the week, we are finally getting behind the Texas A&M Aggies, and we are backing them to get their 3rd quality win against top 25 competition in not just beating, but covering at Mizzou, ending the Tigers' college football playoff dreams for 2025. Texas A&M has earned our skepticism this season, but the recent trajectory suggests they really are closer to the contender the committee sees than the pretender we thought they might be earlier in the year. Now look, they're just 4-4 against the spread overall, but they are 3-1 against the spread in their last 4 SEC matchups, as that offense continues to level up behind Heisman contender Marcel Reed. A&M has averaged nearly 40 points per game over the last month, increasing its output each week from 31 to 35 to 45 to 49. Though nobody should expect a blowout performance against this very strong Missouri defense. The Tigers rank top 15 nationally in run defense and pass defense and get after the quarterback at an elite rate. But Reed's escapability and decision-making are also key, as A&M is top 10 nationally in sacks allowed, meaning they don't. They've allowed only 7 sacks on the entire season. Reed also has reliable help when he gets in a pinch. He's got 2 very efficient running backs in Owens and Moss, who are each averaging 5.6 yards per carry, and he has a premier playmaker on the perimeter in Casey Concepcion, who came from North Carolina State in the offseason. On the other side of the ball, Missouri's offense revolves almost entirely around Ahmad Hardy at this point, who is unquestionably one of the very best running backs in the entire nation. But with freshman quarterback Matt Zollers making his first start, the Tigers face a considerable challenge against an A&M defense that ranks first nationally in third down defense and 13th in the country against the run. If Missouri can't stay ahead of schedule, which essentially requires Hardy to have a 150-yard type game, they're going to be putting Zollers in really tough passing spots. A lot of 3rd and mediums and 3rd and longs. Yikes. The question then becomes whether Mizzou can reach the 20-point mark if Texas A&M can get to 27, which we think they can. Recent SEC play says that is a tall ask for Mizzou. With both teams technically alive in the college football playoff race, motivation shouldn't be an issue here. But Missouri may be carrying added noise with Eli Drinkwitz's growing presence in the coaching carousel. And all of that considered, this does feel like a kitchen sink game for Mizzou. But with Zollers at quarterback, is the sink big enough and heavy enough to matter? We don't think so. Give us Texas A&M 30-20 covering the 6.5. All right, in our 5th and final hunch of the week, we are back behind the San Diego Aztecs as they continue their warpath through the Mountain West, taking down 6-3 Hawaii and covering the 6.5 points in Paradise while increasing their claim to the Group of 5 playoff bid. Look, San Diego State has been one of our favorite teams to back this year. You know that. And they've rewarded that trust pretty much every step of the way. The Aztecs are 7-1 against the spread, covering 6 straight, including multiple road wins. And while their offense has steadily improved, this is a team that wins on their defense. SDSU is not just the best overall defense in the Mountain West. They dominate nearly every major statistical category. They lead the conference in scoring defense with just 10 points allowed per game. They lead the conference in rushing defense, in passing defense, in third down defense, and red zone defense. The only vulnerability is a lack of takeaways, though they're in the middle of the pack for that. They're not bottom of the barrel. Simply put, this is a unit built to suffocate opponents and force games to be played on SDSU's terms. And that spells trouble for Hawaii. The Rainbow Warriors are bowl eligible for the first time in years, and we applaud that at Barely Qualified Picks. But look, they are a very one-dimensional offense, and they rank last in the conference in rushing. They rely completely on their air attack. And why shouldn't they with Coach Tommy Chang? While they do pile up yards through the air, over 300 yards per game, those numbers have come against a far more forgiving schedule than what SDSU brings to the table. Hawaii's rushing defense also looks average on paper, but when they've faced competent ground attacks, they've consistently given up huge chunks of yardage. And that's important because the Aztecs are likely to lean on Lucky Sutton, who ranks 14th nationally in rushing and has been the heartbeat of their offense. Even if Hawaii is able to hit a couple of big plays through the air, it's hard to see them scoring more than 14 to 17 points against this defense. The real question is whether SDSU can get into the mid-20s. And with Sutton leading the way and Hawaii's run defense being more reputation than reality, we think they can. SDSU has won 5 straight in this series, and while many of those games were competitive, this year's Aztecs are different. Give us San Diego State 24-13, covering the 6.5. All right, that's all for our 5 hunches of the week. Now let's turn our attention to the big game tracker. Week 11 doesn't quite have the same marquee matchups that Week 10 offered, but there are still plenty of games with the potential to move the needle in conference and playoff races. Let's break it down. We've got Oregon minus 6.5 at Iowa. I know, my beloved Ducks, but here's what I'm here to say. Don't overlook this Iowa defense. Don't think Iowa is really in the mix for the playoff at this point, but the selection committee says they are, and this defense is the reason why. Iowa is the only team this year to legitimately hold the Indiana offense in check when the Hoosiers visited Kinnick Stadium earlier this year. Oregon isn't Indiana. This game is going to be tough sledding for the Ducks. The total is just 40.5 points, so Vegas also expects a low-scoring affair. Give us the Ducks to scrape out a win, but Iowa to cover the number. Oregon 2017. Next, we will go to Lubbock, where BYU is now a 10.5-point underdog at Texas Tech. The big battle is finally here. It's a top 10 showdown for first place in the Big 12. LJ Martin is back in the saddle for BYU, which is going to be absolutely critical to their prospects in this one. Texas Tech has been the odds-on favorite to win the Big 12, and they haven't lost a game that their star quarterback Baron Morton has started. He missed one game, they lost one game. The line opened at 9.5 and then moved into full double-digit territory over the course of 24 hours. Maybe the Raiders do blow out BYU. We just think that the Cougars can keep it close enough to cover the number. Give us Texas Tech 31-21. All right, in our next game, we're going to Tuscaloosa for LSU at Alabama. The Tigers are a 10.5-point favorite at the Tide. And let's get something out of the way from the jump. Given the annual expectations in the Bayou, this is officially a lost season for LSU. But this is also a rivalry game, and the Tigers have lost 2 straight to the Tide. That would be enough to motivate this crew in a lost season alone. Will they also get a post-firing boost similar to what we've seen thus far with midseason firings this year? Of the 6 Power 4 dismissals year to date, teams went 4-1 against the spread in their first game back in action. 5-1 if you count Virginia Tech, which didn't have a line in their immediate next game against Wofford, but then did cover the following game against North Carolina State. The eyeball test says this is Bama in a landslide, but our gut says this is closer than many expect. Give us Alabama 30-21, pulling away late. All right. Going now to the ACC, where we have a team in the ACC hunt in Louisville. They are hosting the Cal Golden Bears. It still cracks me up that this is a conference game. Cal flying across the country from Berkeley to Louisville to play this one. Cal is a 19.5-point underdog. Wow, 19.5 points. That's too many points. While the Cards are still in the ACC hunt, and by virtue of that, in the playoff hunt, they've got to play this game without their best offensive player and leading rusher Isaac Brown. The Ville hasn't covered 19.5 points against any of their ACC opposition with Isaac Brown this year, which further clouds whether they'll have enough in this one to eclipse that margin of victory for the first time. Cal has 2 tough losses. There's no doubt. They got blown out by Duke. They got blown out by SDSU. But otherwise, they've been competitive in essentially every game. Plus, Cal's quarterback, J.K. Sagapolatele, he is just a freshman, so every rep is a valuable one for this offense. Or if he does what Fernando Mendoza did, every rep is valuable for the transfer portal. I trust former Duck coach Justin Wilcox to make this, former Duck and coach Justin Wilcox to make this one a game long enough to cover that massive spread. Give me Louisville 33-20, but give me Cal to cover the 19.5. All right, next we have Duke plus 9.5 at UConn. We love a good basketball school on the gridiron matchup, and we get that this week with the 5-3 Blue Devils, who are still in the mix, very much on the outside looking in, but somewhat in the mix in the ACC, and the 6-3 Huskies. We love Duke, as you well know by now, but even at 4-1, they have work to do, and they're currently sitting at 6, and this is not going to help improve their stock because this is not a conference game. Meanwhile, UConn is bowl eligible again, and we're pretty sure that they're confident that they can not only keep this close, but win it outright at home. I think Duke is going to hit a few more threes in this one, and that proves to be the difference. Give me the Blue Devils 34-27 on the road. All right, now turning to the group of 5. We have the James Madison Dukes minus 13.5 at Marshall. SDSU isn't the only group of 5 program looking to capture more of the national attention and ultimately the college football playoff bid. The Dukes are on an absolute heater at 7-1 and coming off 2 straight 30-plus point blowouts in single-digit spread games. Marshall is no big win to write home about, but another blowout will count in the group of 5 playoff race. Give us James Madison 48-24. That's all we've got for you guys ahead of another big week across the college football landscape. As always, may the betting gods bless your picks and ours. Have a great week, y'all. We'll be back with you tomorrow for NFL.